Good evening again. Thank you very much for anybody that's coming back. As you can see, we've now got Paul with us. Technical difficulties are over. So, of course, if you've now gone off and done something else, it is recorded, so you will be able to watch it anyway. So let's me go, and I will leave you in Vic and Paul's capable hands, and I will see you later. Any questions, please leave on the comments, and we'll get through as many as we can. Thank you.
Chris, thanks very much indeed. Mr. Bowden, it's a delight to see you. It's been too long, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, well, great to see you, Vic, as well. I've not heard your dulcet tones for a long time. It's really good to see you, and I'm looking forward to the next hour or so.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, great to see you. And I'm speaking to you from now sunny Devon, which is always a treat. People have asked me this, and I've got to ask you straight away. Why Zippy? Why is that?
Well, it started way back, obviously, under the Lou Macari era. Having joined in, I think it was March 1988. My first sort of meeting with the players was at the Post House Hotel. I'd come to the county ground to meet Lou, and Chick Bates was at the Post House. All the boys had done their usual run, the 3-4 mile runs we used to do regular. And I remember meeting up with the boys and introducing myself. And one thing they always said to me was, hope you can run, because this is a running club at this time. And a couple of days later, we did a 6-mile run, the usual Thursday run. And I think I trained on the Friday. We didn't have a game on the Saturday. And literally, having done a 6-mile road run for the first time in my life, I didn't have much energy left in my legs. So I remember Lou saying to me after training, you got no zip in you. And it came from that, really. Steve Foley, as he was back then, a real character, he came up to me and was sort of grabbing my face and saying, hey, you got no zip, you got no zip. And from that moment, it kind of stuck with the players. So no zip after a 6-mile run. And I think probably anyone who does a 6-mile road run for the first time will have testament to that.
Yeah, I don't think you're alone in that, to be quite honest. Well, there we are. That knocks that on the head. Now we know. Fantastic. It's always great to talk to a retired player who's still considerably younger than I am, which is a bit of a blow to me, I have to say. But September 64, you came into the world, and your first sort of foray into professional football was with Chelsea and training it off to Paddington every weekend. How did that all come about?
Yeah, I was obviously playing local football in Cardiff, playing for my local area, Llanrumney Youth Club, Llanrumney High School, and so on. And we were playing in a tournament up in Llanellian, sort of posh part of Cardiff, and got approached after the tournament by 2 gentlemen with my current manager at that time. And they said we'd be interested in taking you up to Chelsea. So they then went to the school, I think, the following Monday, and obviously came to meet my mum, who I was brought up by as a single parent. And yeah, from there on, it was, would I like to go up to Chelsea every sort of holidays? And on a Friday evening, I was 13 or 14 years of age at the time, and I used to catch a train from Paddington to London, get in a tube to South Kensington, and then get in a taxi and take me to the hotel, where there was a number of other boys sort of splattered around the country, or scattered, I should say. And we used to meet up on a Friday, play on a Saturday morning, and then either watch the first team on the Saturday afternoon or go back to Cardiff. So it was quite I think when you think back, it was quite natural, really, as once we got used to it. But I think in the modern world we live in now, you certainly wouldn't be doing that sort of thing. Getting into taxis at 13, 14 years of age, getting on tubes, and even going from sort of Llanrumney, where I lived, into Cardiff on a bus was just like a natural thing, as I say. But nowadays, I just don't think that would happen.
No, extraordinary though, really. And it didn't work out in terms of first team experiences for you at Chelsea. But who were your peers around about that time? Were there any that actually did make it into the Chelsea team? You remember that?
Well, ironically, I was a schoolboy, obviously, from 13 to 16. So I travelled up for 3 years. And one of my big allies at the club was Tom Jones.
Yeah.
Tom was obviously born in Aldershot or Fleet. So yeah, we obviously knew each other way back, and it was great when he came. I think either 89 or might have been late 88 when he joined. So I'd known Tom for many years, and he'd sort of watched my career. I'd watched his. He actually got a scholarship or an apprenticeship, as it was back in them days, and I didn't. I went to Newport initially, and then on to Cardiff. So I seen Tom sort of on the football circuits at various places. And then, of course, Tom left, went to Farnborough and Weymouth. And then Weymouth was where he sort of revigorated his career when he went to Aberdeen from there. And then ultimately back to Swindon, where we're still very good friends. You know, our wives are very good friends. And in fact, I was only around Tom's on Sunday for a catch-up, because I hadn't seen him for a while, and he's going through a tough time at the moment with some problems with his knee. So great to catch up with him. And another player was around his house with Mark Turkington, who was a year older than us, but we've kept in touch with him over the years as well. So it was a good catch up. All sat having a nice cold drink.
Lovely. Well, very much needed on on that particular day. Jason says, Zippy is a genuine town legend. Thank you for your service to our club, which we'll get into in a minute. And it was a great service, Jason. There's no question about that. But a brief foray to Newport. You seem to have a brief forays to Newport quite often. You didn't stick around there, did you?
Well, no, my first signing for Newport was when I left school. I had an opportunity to go to Cardiff or Newport. And it was the year that Newport had got to the quarterfinals of the Cup Winners' Cup. And I remember going along as a 16-year-old young man with the chief scout, Harold Joy, who was the one who sort of got me to Newport. Len Ashurst was the manager. People like Tommy Tynan, Keith Oakes, John Aldridge were playing for Newport. And they drew 2-2 with Karl Zeiss Jena, the German team. So there was 18,000 people crammed into Somerton Park. And I'm sure you can remember days going into Somerton Park. I mean, that was amazing. And that convinced me to sign with Len Ashurst, the manager. And as I said, there were many good quality players at the club at that time. It was a smallish club, but were sort of punching above their weight. And there was only 3 apprentices. And we had to do all the usual chores, the boots, the dressing rooms, and painting the stands. So in the summer, I was covered in black and amber from head to toe. So that was a real introduction, full-time football and training with the first team. Because as I said, there was only 3 apprentices. So I was training alongside John Aldridge, Tommy Tynan, Keith Oakes, Nigel Vaughan, Steve Lowndes. Great players who went on to do great things. Certainly John Aldridge did, for sure. Mark Kendall, a goalkeeper, who unfortunately passed away when he was 40. So yeah, great memories of my early days, but a real introduction of going from schoolboy football into men's senior football, and you had to adapt really quickly.
Yeah, many might remember, of course, Somerton Park was where the Newport Wasp Speedway team used to race as well. So there was that old Speedway track around there. Sadly, no Newport Speedway team anymore. No Swindon team at the moment, come to that. From there, Cardiff then, and quite a successful spell at Cardiff.
Yeah, Len Ashurst obviously signed me at Newport, but it was only like a 1-year sort of apprenticeship back then for me personally, for some reason. And Len went to Cardiff, having had great success at Newport. And he took me along with him. So I was delighted to go back with him. Len was a real honest manager. He loved the hard working side of the game, the honesty, integrity, humanitarian side of it. And Jimmy Goodfellow, his assistant as well, another, honest working bloke. And yeah, I made my debut in 1981, I think it was, against Wrexham at Ninian Park. We lost 1-0, which is never good at home at Cardiff. But from that time on, it was certainly a good season, because we won promotion that year. And Len left, I think, 18 months after signing me there to Sunderland. And Alan Durbin came in. And although I'd played quite a few games, by the time I was sort of 19, 20, I'd been released. So played 70-odd games, did reasonably well. But new manager, as we see so often in the game, opinions are very different. Whether you're a manager, a supporter, we've all got opinions. But when the manager's in charge and he doesn't quite fancy you, you have to move on. And unfortunately, that's what happened to my hometown club, which is what Cardiff was.
Merthyr Tydfil as a semi-pro, which is slightly different. But an experience for you. You'd already said about the painting at Newport, but of course, then you had another experience where you had to supplement your income, didn't you? It wasn't a case of, a rich footballer, was it? In those days, it was slightly different.
No, absolutely. I mean, I went to Merthyr, actually, only played a couple of games pre-season for him, but ultimately I signed for Bath City. So Lynn Jones was manager of Merthyr, and they'd done quite well in Europe as well. I think they played Atalanta, and I think they'd had a great result against them the previous season. So there was kind of a pull to stay in Wales and perhaps bounce back. But I spoke to Bobby Jones, at the Bath City manager at that time, and he was a real positive man. Said he'd been sort of tracking me for a while and enjoyed the way I played and so on. So I ended up signing for Bath on a 2-year contract. Travelled across the bridge. I think it was the first time I'd done too much travelling after the Chelsea disappointment. So, and Bobby instilled the confidence back into me. I also did a little bit of work with a friend of mine, sheet metal roofing. So I was high up in the skies, and I was a little bit nervous going up the ladders and so on, carrying these big sheets, but it was helping a friend of mine. Also did a bit of labouring in the meantime and selling a bit of insurance as well. So I always had aspirations to come back in. And as I said, Bath City gave me a platform. Really enjoyed my football there, to see sort of non-league football and the spirit and the commitment that them boys have, all doing full-time jobs and then committing themselves a couple of times a week. And in the Vauxhall conference, as it was then, we did sort of national travelling. And we were similar to pros, apart from the full-time training. And as I said, all the lads were fully committed, and some great lads who I'd met and stayed in contact with over the years, really. So good experience. But ultimately, I was really desperate to get back into the full-time game. And that's where the Newport opportunity came back sort of 2.5 years later.
Now, here's something about your Bath days. This is from Andrew. He says, used to live in Bath and Twerton, and when not watching the town, would regularly see Paul Bodin up front with Graham Withy. I don't think he ever played up front for us. Now, I believe you scored 21 goals in a season. Is that right?
That's right. My first season at Bath, I was, for some reason, Bobby pushed me from left back to striker. I think I played up there by accident, and I scored a couple of goals in a pre-season friendly. And from that moment on, Bobby always saw me as a striker or a left winger. So, I had some great times, lots of goals, scored a great equaliser in the FA Cup at Ashton Gate. I think we drew 2-2 with Bristol City. So, things went quite well. And I think it alerted a few clubs really to show a bit of interest and start tracking me. And ultimately, as I said, after 2.5 years, I went back to Newport. But Lou was monitoring me as well from close quarters up the road here in Swindon. He didn't quite get me the first time because I went to Newport under Brian Eastick. But it was only 6 weeks, and the club were in a bit of turmoil financially. And thankfully, I did come to Swindon in March 1988. So it's kind of a whirlwind return to Newport. But thankfully, it was a real progressive move to come to Swindon, where there was obviously a great manager, and there was a lot of fantastically talented players at Swindon at that particular time.
Why didn't you stay up front then? I mean, if you had that, obviously, a knack for scoring goals, let's be honest, 20 in the season, that's pretty decent at anybody's language. Are you a natural defender or are you a natural striker? How would you describe yourself?
Well, all years I was growing up, when I went to Chelsea, I was a left winger. So my schoolboy days were left winger, number 10, just off the striker. I was a late developer, so I was never quite physically ready at sort of 15, 16, 17. But 18 to 20, I started on the growth spurt. And I suppose one of my biggest assets was my left foot. So if I got a chance in and around the box, I would just shoot. And thankfully, on 21 occasions, I don't know if they were all with my left foot. Mine is quite way back now. But yeah, I love scoring goals. And as a left back for Swindon, obviously I got forward as often as possible. And then when we went with a back three and wing backs, that probably suited me even more. Hence, I think one season I got 12 goals as well from that position. So I enjoyed scoring. I enjoyed creating. But perhaps in league level, I wasn't perhaps good enough to play up front, but thoroughly enjoyed scoring and creating goals, as I said.
Well, at the time you joined Swindon, of course, the club very much on the up, weren't they? We had the 85-86 season, record points total, then Division 3, then Division 2. Lou Macari, you mentioned it's a running club. Boy, it was a running club. So how did you take to that?
I found it difficult, to be honest. As I said, I'd never done 6-mile road runs. It's actually 5.7. I'm exaggerating, because we actually went and marked it in our cars and drove to see how far it was. But Lou was very clever. I mean, he treated everybody exactly the same, and we all did the same running. Like nowadays, training's modified for certain players, certain positions. But back then, it was everybody get your running shoes on, and he'd send out the slower ones at the start. People like Phil King and myself, giving Phil a good mention there. We used to keep each other company in the runs. But and then the faster players would go last. And by the time you got round to sort of Shrivenham Road, the Alan McLaughlins, rest his soul, Fraser Digby, Lee Bernard, Dave Hockaday, Steve Whites. I mean, they were incredible road runners. I mean, really, the times they used to set. But they were obviously used to it. I did get used to it over a period of time, and my times did get quicker, but it was something that I absolutely loathed, road running, the pounding, the intensity and the pressure you put on your joints back then it was difficult to overcome at the start. But like I said, I did get used to it. And finally, when Kingy did leave for Sheffield Wednesday, I found a regular spot in the team, and I was delighted to get that opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, Kingy moved on for about 400,000, I think, to Sheffield Wednesday, didn't he? And to great success, of course. We spoke to him about that penalty against Inter Milan, which he's very happy to talk about whenever you ask him. But, a great player, Phil King. He served Swindon extraordinarily well. And you obviously get on very well with Kingy, because he sent me a message saying, Paul Bodin, top, when he knew I was doing this, top bloke. So he's full of respect for you. So you obviously get on very well with him.
No, absolutely. And it was always great to go back to the county ground over recent years, and Phil doing the marketing commercial side upstairs. And he'd always introduce me as the third best left back behind John Trollope and himself, of course. So no, it was always good fun. Great banter. And of course, Phil does a lot of work out in the community in terms of the sporting dinners, and does a fantastic job, allied to running his pub. But he does a lot of great work at Swindon and in the surrounding area. So fair play to him. But yeah, smashing bloke, Phil. I actually, when I became manager at Bath City in 1998 for 3 years, I got Phil to come down to first of all, to try and play in the first team. But with his injury problems over the previous few years, he wasn't quite able to play regularly in the first team. But he did a great job with our reserve team. And him and Dave Hobbs, who was the manager, brought on some great young talent, and we were happy to use them in the first team a bit later in their careers. So yeah, really pleased with Phil. And like you said, we've kept good mates, and all the guys who live local, I've kept in touch with a lot of them, and Phil is obviously very much part of that.
Yeah. Steve has sent this in. Evening, Vic. Paul has been a professional game for 40 years. 40 years, long time, either playing or coaching. Can you ask him what single thing he would like introduced back into the game that has sadly gone? Also, what advice he's given to Billy? We'll get on to Billy a little later, maybe, because obviously, also played for Swindon. But what do you think's sadly gone from the game?
Well, being a coach over the last few years, young players go into football clubs now at 6-7 years of age. And for me, I think that's too young. I think playing street football, playing with your mates is a huge part. Going out for a drink on a Saturday night with your wife and teammates, that was a big special part for me. When Lingy came here and Sean Taylor, I lived in Peatmore, and to go out for a drink on a Saturday night and have the interaction with the supporters, not through Twitter or Facebook. It was actually eye-to-eye contact. And to sit in a pub and somebody come up to you and have a chat, I saw nothing wrong with that. I think nowadays, if you're seen to be out drinking, it's probably looked down upon a little bit. But I think the interaction with the players and the genuine interaction that we had in them days, I think is sadly being taken away.
You didn't have camera phones pointing at you all the time either, because if you were in a pub and you'd had 2 or 3 pints, then people would these days perhaps film you on a camera phone, wouldn't they? You didn't have those in those days.
No, you didn't. But I think long as you're conducting yourself, listen, I'm not saying we went out and got drunk and fallen on the floor and things like that. It was actually a good, after a Saturday, I always felt like, we deserved a drink and to have, if you wanted a drink, I mean, people like Dave Hockaday never touched a drop of alcohol, and there are many other players who didn't. But just to go out and interact and socialise, have a bite to eat with your wife, I think, we had great success, and I think you had to celebrate the success in one way or another. And we relaxed, enjoyed ourselves. Like I said, it was the Village Inn in Shore, and everybody used to come in there and have a drink and a chat, and we saw nothing wrong with it. It was just part of what we did in them days. And I think, maybe that is something that's missing now. And I think the young players who come through now, everything's done through their handsets or iPads, where we actually had a genuine feeling for the supporters, and I think that was reciprocated. So yeah, I think it's a shame they can't do that nowadays. I also think the young players are coming into clubs far too early. I think they should enjoy themselves before they get into the almost conditioned football that perhaps takes away some of their natural ability. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, you're one of the easiest people ever to talk to. You've always never have a problem with conversation, and that's great, because a lot of footballers are in that kind of bubble, aren't they? And they don't break out of the bubble.
Yeah, well, if we think back, I mean, all the reporters were invited up to the training ground on almost most days. I think they could just turn up, sit on the bench up at the training ground and wait for players to come off, and we just have that interaction, wouldn't we? Nowadays it's all controlled. I think it's Mondays, Thursday afternoons, something like that, and they're restricted to who they can talk to and who they can't talk to. Same after games or pre-games. You're only allowed to talk to this player, that player. So I think it's very much controlled and conditioned now, where we had that good relationship with all the reporters. And again, maybe that's another thing that could change. I don't know, but you have to be careful. I mean, the press, I always had a good relationship, as you said, Vic, and it's very nice of you to say that. I've always got time for everybody, and certainly the press. If they're going to write stories, let's write good ones rather than bad ones. And if I can give you some, of my thoughts and my honest thoughts, then I'm more than happy to do that.
Lovely. Well, you always did, and I was always grateful. Paul's first 2 games for us were on the plastic, the infamous Luton Full Members Cup semi-final, and Oldham the following Saturday. And yes, it snowed in March. Do you remember that? Do you remember those 2 games?
I do. Yeah, I remember my debut. As I said, when I joined, I think I joined on the Wednesday or the Thursday. I think it was a Thursday. We did the run, and then we played a combination game on the Saturday. And most of the boys played, who would be in the first team, at the county ground. So, and there were some international stars playing for Arsenal. So it was a good, tough test. And then, of course, we went down to Bisham Abbey on the Sunday morning to practice on the 4G, or the Astro, as it was called then. Very hard, very different to what it is now. It's much more grass-like now than what it was. Yeah, and we played Luton on the Tuesday. I was delighted to start my first game, and it was a game we should have won. Semi-final of the Simod Cup. I mean, I think, was it Dave Bamber or Jimmy Quinn went through, and someone in the crowd, when it was 0-0, blew a whistle, and they just passed it back to the goalkeeper instead of scoring. So we went on to get beat. I think it was extra time, if my memory serves me right. Mark Steen, I think, got a couple of the goals then. And unfortunately, we missed out on going to the final. So that would have been it was a great memory, obviously, making my debut for Swindon. But at the same time, it would have been fantastic to go and play in a cup final.
Because this was a decent Luton side. They had players like Steve Bold at the back and people like that, didn't they? And yeah, it was Dave Bamber going through. I remember it now. He kind of stopped, didn't he? And his natural instinct was to go on and score. I remember it vividly, I have to say. So, all right, you're starting on the plastic. Oldham's was similar as well, wasn't it? That was the hard plastic it was the original sort of plastic pitch. Lou eventually moves on and Ozzie comes in. What change was there when he came in? I mean, a big change, wasn't there?
It was a dramatic change, really, from being a sort of power-based team, really ultra fit, as we've mentioned already, a lot of the running, so you were, really, really fit at that time. And then Ozzie came in, and we didn't do any running. It was all with the football, five-a-sides, possession-based work, and the diamond formation, where Alan McLoughlin obviously found a fantastic home behind two great strikers. Al went on to score, I think, 18 goals, something like that, 17, 18 goals, with the two strikers getting probably 20 plus, Shearer and Chalky. So we had an abundance of goals, and the fullbacks were encouraged to push high and wide. Myself, Dave Kerslake, Nick Summerby, and it was brilliant. I mean, Ozzie just, with the famous words, play, play, play. And he didn't worry too much about the opposition, the opponents. It was more about what we did. And thankfully, we had a tremendously successful season under Ozzie, and with some great individual performances throughout the season as well. And more so than I've mentioned Al a couple of times. But Al had a tremendous season, to score that many goals from midfield, and ultimately got him a great move to Southampton, probably on the back of scoring that wonderful goal at the Dell in the Cup, where he dribbled in between in the box and slotted home a fantastic goal. So, yeah, we all enjoyed going in every day. With Ozzie, it was a smile. And as I said, we didn't do the running, so we could throw our running shoes away. But certainly on the training ground, it was all about attacking play, bringing out from the back Colin and Ghetto or Tim Parkin, bringing the ball out. And I thought it really helped a lot of players. I mean, people like Colin, who was a tremendous defender, but I think he really improved as a player, bringing it out and having the confidence to go and play, link the play from the back through the midfield, and then went on to greater things himself, ultimately playing for Scotland. So, it was great times under Ozzie, and he obviously moved on. And then I'd moved on at a similar time, or I might have moved on just before he did, to Crystal Palace. So, there were changing times. Unfortunately, we had the debacle of the relegation, didn't we? Having won promotion at Wembley via the playoffs, and then being demoted a couple of weeks later. And that was a big, big blow to the football club for sure.
Yeah, horrendous. I think I'm right in saying that he named the same team 26 or 27 times in a row, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, Digby, obviously yourself, David Kerslake, Calderwood, Gittins, you could reel off the whole team. And, it's an extraordinary thing to be able to do, isn't it? To name that so many times in a row. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, when you compare it to the modern game where players get rested regular, all we wanted to do was play, I think. And perhaps the modern player gets used to being left out and rested. But I think back then, all you wanted to do was play. You enjoy training, coming in every day and training. And then, of course, on a Saturday, you were hopeful that you were going to play. And the manager trusted you. And as you said, I think it was 26, 27 times that we had the same team, which is incredible. To stay fit at that time in a successful team where everybody was trying to beat us. We were playing a different way to a lot of the teams. It was a progressive football club. And the way we played was a joy for everybody, the players on the pitch, and obviously the supporters got used to it. I remember it took them a while because we had the sort of power play under Lou where Fraser would catch it and kick it forward as quick as we could. But under Lou, under Ozzie, it was more methodical and more possession based. And as I said, there was a few moans and groans initially, but they could see what we were trying. And I think Ozzie went to press a few times and said, look, be patient. We will be a success. And we certainly were. But come the end of the season, we were a free-flowing, goal-scoring football team. A joy to play.
Absolutely. I always remember one famous night in Newcastle, though, when I think there were two strikers up front for Newcastle who got 50 goals between us. Shearer and White had got 50 goals between them. And I said before the game, there's bound to be a goal in this game. And, of course, it was 0-0, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was, yeah. I remember.
Big game, though. Big result, wasn't it?
It was a massive one, yeah. I think it was around Christmas time, wasn't it? It might have been Boxing Day or New Year's Day. I know it was around Christmas. Of course, it's a long trip, 5-6 hours. And I think we'd had sort of Christmas dinner early, and then we got on to the training ground and got on the coach, had a long, long trip up there. But, yeah, it was a hard-fought game. And as you said, there was probably four of the best in-form strikers at that time. and of course a 0-0. But that was a good game, and to get any result but Newcastle over the years was a fantastic achievement.
Blackburn defeated, of course, in the semi-finals brilliantly. And just to read you this other one, this is from Malcolm. Good evening, Vic and Paul. My favourite Swindon player, without doubt. Paul will know me from when I first met him in the early 90s when I used to go to school with Paul's daughters. Such a gentleman and a legend of a player. Thank you so much for your amazing service for Swindon. Pete Lango, of course, I think was a youth team player around about the time when you were there. Macca, what a bloke, top man, and the fridge. Yeah, I mean, you know, people talk of Alan McLoughlin with hushed tones, really, and rightly so, because he was a player when he came to Swindon, struggled to get in the team to begin with, didn't he? And then had sort of like the second coming and was integral under Ozzie, wasn't he? I mean, he was like the cog behind everything, really, in a way.
Well, he was absolutely. I don't know if he got released or he might have come on a nominal fee for Manchester United. And of course, Lou Macari knew all about him. A young player, 17, 18 at the time when he first came. And moving home, you know, it's a big move, isn't it? You know, you've got lifestyle changes, living in the digs. But yeah, he played a few games under Lou, but certainly under Ozzie, when Ozzie could see his real talent and his running skill. I mean, Al could run all day and receive the ball at high level, at high speed. He had that great body movement where he could receive it on the back foot and dribble and drive at players. And then he had the great technique where he could move the ball from left foot to right foot. And to score that many goals from midfield was phenomenal. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, you know, he had serious problems over the last few years, and ultimately he passed away. Very, very sad for everybody close to the family, and of course everybody remembers him on the football pitch and spending so many hours, you know, during the week with him. But yeah, iconic through them years, through them successful years, and got rewarded with a fantastic move to Southampton. So he'll long live, won't he, in the memory of all the close people and certainly the supporters of Swindon Town through that era.
Very much so. So that final then, the 1-0 massacre really of Sunderland, the most one-sided 1-0 ever, I think it's fair to say. And then Alan goes off to Italy, of course, for the World Cup of the Republic of Ireland. And then 10 days later, you mentioned it, the demotion happened. Where were you when you heard that? I was at Villa Park, standing behind the Secretary of the Football League who read it out. So that's where I was. Where were you?
I was in Tenerife on a family holiday with my wife and children. And there was a family from Swindon there, actually, from Blunsdon, Keith and Janet. And they had 2 young children. And Keith was the guy who told me. Back then, the mobile phones weren't really used that much, and it was down to the local phone boxes with your pesetas. But Keith told me he'd rang home and found out, and I was obviously devastated. You know, we're on a family holiday, you know, sort of still celebrating the success of the playoff, which we thoroughly deserved, as you mentioned. There could have been 5 or 6, possibly even more. We were outstanding on the day. So yeah, I mean, it was like, wow, you know, we were demoted, I think, 2 leagues, and then we appealed, and then we got put back in the same league. So, and it's funny, I'm quite friendly with Gary Hours, who played in the Sunderland team. Gary works for the National League, and I bump into him quite regular at games. And you know, we still talk about it now. You know, what a one-sided game it was. And Gary, they were a good team. You know, let's not underestimate them at that time. But we totally dominated them. And because we heard whispers that they'd perhaps been told that they were going to be promoted and not us, regardless of the result. But he said that wasn't true. You know, he had no knowledge of that. And it was just, yeah, devastation. I think the whole club was affected, wasn't it, for quite a few months after. To have it taken away from us when we'd won the right, did it through the players. And I think there were stories that Gary Herbert, the chairman at the time, had gone to the FA and said, look, you know, if we win this playoff, these playoffs, are we going up? And he was assured that we would. So it was a real shock to everybody concerned.
And I think it's fair to say, by common consent, you would have stayed up, wouldn't you? I think that side, all right, you wouldn't have won the league. Let's not be daft, but you would have, without question, stayed up that year.
Well, I'm sure we would. You know, as you mentioned earlier and said, you know, there was a real team spirit and a group of players that wanted to play every week. 26, 27 games consecutively. If we could have kept everybody together, then who knows? I mean, it's never easy to say, yes, we would have stayed up, but I'm sure we were well prepared with one or two additions. We could have given ourselves a fantastic opportunity, but as we just mentioned, it wasn't to be, and we had to deal with other issues around the club as well. I think the following season was when poor old Kevin Morris committed suicide, didn't he? And that ripped the heart out of the club as well. I mean, for Kev, who was such a fantastic character at the club, someone we all kind of went to and lent on, real wonderful man, great clubman, and another devastating impact on the club for sure.
Sure. Yes. Well, the man with the spoons, I think it's fair to say, with Kevin.
Mr. Spoons, yeah.
Mr. Spoons, incredible. Yeah. So eventually, I always remember, though, that the first result after that was at Charlton, I think, and you won that game, if I remember rightly. It was the opening game of the next season, and I thought that's one of the best results from a Swindon team. I know that season didn't work out, but to have come back from what you've been through and then to get a result on the opening day of the season at Charlton, that was some result, I think.
Did they play at Sellers Park?
Yes, they did, yeah.
I think they did. I got a feeling I might have scored that day, Vic, as well.
Yeah, I think you did, yes.
So, yeah, we obviously got off to a good start then. Thanks for reminding me. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there was a hangover after that. But, yeah, to get off to a good start was fine. But yeah, just things didn't go as well as we'd hoped today after that. But and then, of course, a change of manager. I'd left by then, though, I think, before Ozzie had gone. But yeah, it was still huge disappointment, though. Although we got off to a good start, there was still a tingling of regret, obviously, with what had happened.
Sure. Mark Jeffrey says that was a great side. Well, it certainly was. You got the move to Palace, and I always remember, you won't remember this, but you said to me, I will be back. Yeah. And you went off to Palace. It didn't really work out. And I think you went off to Newcastle for a brief spell under Ozzie, didn't you, on loan?
I did, yeah. I mean, I joined. Ironically, we beat Oxford on the Tuesday night, but I just got
always good to know.
Always good to know. But I got a bang on the knee, and I was due to go to Palace the next day, and I went there with a bit of a swollen knee, so I missed the sort of first 2 weeks having signed there. I got through the medical okay, and to be fair, it was just a bit of bruising and a bit of swelling, and I was stuck in the hotel Selsdon Park, away from the family. And when you're injured and you're not part of the team and so on, so it was a bit of a strange signing but not being able to train and play with the rest of the boys. But they were a great group. I mean, the Wrights, the Brights, the Andy Grays, the Nigel Martins, Jeff Thomases, Salakos, Eddie McGoldricks. I mean, these guys, they were top players. And after a couple of weeks, I got training with them and used to the old training ground down at Mitcham, and finally made my debut against Tottenham Hotspur in a 1-0 victory. Against, I got a picture. Remember the Vinnie Jones picture with Gaza where he's reaching and doing something he shouldn't do? I've got a similar picture where Gaza's in front of me and reaching round, but he wasn't reaching for anything in particular, just trying to hold me in as a defender. But so we got off to a good start. I think we finished third that year, but I was cup tied, so I wasn't involved in the cup run either. So again, a little bit of disappointment there. So it went okay between sort of getting fit to the end of the season. But in the summer, I was on a 14-game appearance, and then they had to pay money to Swindon Town for transfer fee. So I went to see Steve Coppell and I spoke to the chairman. I was on 14 games and I stopped getting picked, and I was wondering why, but there was a hefty extra transfer fee. So that was the end of it, really. Ozzie had gone to Newcastle. And I was going to be a straight swap with Franz Carr, the old winger.
Winger, yeah.
And he fractured his kneecap the day the deal was going to be done. So instead of signing on a permanent deal, it was a loan deal with a view. But with Franz being out for so long, I was there a month. I think it was over the December period. And Glenn Hoddle had come back to Swindon. Oh, sorry, he came to Swindon as player manager, and he showed a great interest, him and John Gorman. And I went and met him, and thankfully came back, and we had some more great successful seasons. So yeah, I was really pleased. And as you said, I'll be back. It certainly came to fruition.
Well, you walked down the stairs. I always remember this. You walked down the stairs at the county ground with Glenn. You said, "I told you I'd be back," and you were. And what a team that was! I mean, you know, Chalky's banging in goals as he always does. He was with you at Bath, I think, for a little while, wasn't he? As your assistant when you were manager there as well.
Yes, absolutely. When we both finished 1998, I went to Bath, and I had to try and convince him away because he was still playing league football, I think, either at Hereford or Cardiff. But yeah, he was a local man, wasn't he, Chalky, down in Chipping Sodbury, and it was a good opportunity for both of us really to get on the coaching ladder. But certainly that season, coming back and playing under Glenn, again a slight modification in the team shape. We were playing 3 centre halves and wing backs, and I suppose that brought the best out of me as well. And with Glenn playing in the middle as the sweeper, I mean, left foot, right foot. If he made a run, you know, we were like wide receivers. I mean, he would put pinpoint passes to myself or Dave Kerslake or Nick Summerby on the other side. And again, it was an absolute pleasure. You know, I'm sure the supporters enjoyed watching it. But just to play and train with Glenn was incredible. I mean, he was an unbelievable talent, who one of them players who perhaps should have had well over 100 caps, but for some reason never got more than probably 50, 54, 56, something like that. But a great talent. Really enjoyed my time under Glenn. And obviously he went on to some fantastic things with John Gorman, who was also someone who I've kept close contact with for many, many years.
Yeah, we had John on not too long ago doing this very thing. Actually, he was off to play golf with you, I think, the next day or the next week or whatever. Anyway, but you obviously kept in touch with him and played golf with him. So there we are. You'll recognise those shirts behind me, of course. Those are shirts that you wore with great distinction for Swindon. Here's another comment from Rob. Kevin Morris was such a nice man. I knew a few of the players back in the day. I used to bring a squash racket back from Singapore. I had an accident skiing and tore my ACL. Kevin fixed me up at the club with intensive physio. Never forget that, all the lads. So thank you very much, Dee, for that, Rob. That playoff season then, the football was incredible. I always remember one League Cup tie at Torquay. I don't know if you remember this, but it was in the first minute and Glenn Hoddle had the ball, 60-yard pass into the path of David Kerslake, who squared it into the middle, and Swindon scored in the opening minute. And that is exactly what you just said. You were, you know, the fullbacks were the wide receivers, weren't they? We were. I think it was 6-0 that game. Yeah, it was 6-0.
Yeah, I remember it. And I was on a course a few years ago with, I'm trying to think of his name now. It's just eluded me. The right winger, Paul Hall, the Jamaican.
Yeah.
And Paul played in that game. And having not really spent too much time with him prior to this course, for 2 years, we met every 6 weeks. He always talked about that game, and he used to shake his head and say, how good were you at that time? That team was unbelievable. And as you said, an early cup game, we demolished them very early in the game, because them games can always be a little bit tricky, can't they, in the early rounds? And teams nowadays tend to weaken their teams a little bit, but we always went strong wherever we possibly could. And pre-season, where the pitches were fantastic, it was a great opportunity to go and play and set a marker really for the early part of the season. And thankfully that continued right through to the playoffs.
Yeah, the playoffs themselves then, Tranmere Rovers beaten over 2 legs. And then you come to that momentous game at Wembley. It is an extraordinary game. And I looked at some of the highlights this afternoon, and you kind of forget how great a game it was, because you get into that 3-0 lead. Sean Taylor doing what he does, heads through 17 players and heads it into the back of the net, it seems. Hoddle had scored with a magnificent goal early on, and a 3-0 lead. And then, of course, the comeback to 3-3. How were your legs at that point? Were they feeling like lead? What were you feeling?
Well, to be fair, it was, as you mentioned, I mean, it was such a great game of football. And for Glenn, you know, to break out from his centre-half position, sweeper, through midfield, and then linking up with Maskey, Craig Maskell on the edge of the box, and a clever little back heel from Maskey. He was one of them players. I mean, he had a great amount of ability, very clever. When he was one-on-one, you'd always fancy him to score. But just that little body movement, little back heel, and Glenn just strokes it into the net, really. I mean, it was a fantastic way to start the game. As you mentioned, Sean, I mean, Sean would put his head through anything for you, and he'd take out his gum shield and celebrate. Still have fond memories of that. Couldn't understand the word he was saying playing next to him. But Sean, what another one, you know, he's another great player who I keep in contact with. Sean, fantastic man, great human being. And then John Moncur, I think, did he score the other one? It was Maskell. It was Maskey who scored. Like Monkey did the little trick on the edge of the box, and Maskey the one-on-one finishing off the crossbar or inside the post. But yeah, it was there, wasn't it? You know, half time. What do you say to your team when you're 3-0 up at Wembley and everything's going fantastically well? They obviously had other ideas. Graham Little, not Graham Little. What was his name? The manager. He'd been there 3 times, hadn't he? And lost. Brian Little. And Brian would have had some harsh words. Obviously, they were a great team at that time. You know, had some really good players in their team, but they just didn't perform first half. And of course, they came out all guns blazing second half, and shook us to the core. Had a couple of opportunities and scored some good goals. And it was a case of, you know, trying to get back our rhythm in the game. And we had a couple of really good chances. We didn't take them. And you start to think, will that opportunity come? But of course, when you got Glenn in the team and Steve White, the combination of them fantastic forward passes from Glenn, Steve White makes a run off the shoulder of the defender. Glenn puts it in behind to precision. Steve White just heads it past the keeper, and Kevin Poole thinks he can get there, and unfortunately for him, he catches Chalky, and the referee points to the spot. So then it's over to me. Who
just hold on. I want you to take us through it in full glory in a moment, because David Addery, school teacher, if I remember rightly, points to the spot. There's some controversy about, is it a penalty? Isn't it a penalty? What were your thoughts? Is it a penalty? Well, from sort of deep, close to the halfway line at that time, you know, I can see Steve's headed it past him, and then there was contact. So from my distant opinion, it was a definite penalty, and you can watch it over and over. I mean, some people say perhaps he went to ground a little bit easy, but if there's contact in the box, and certainly nowadays, the modern game, it's definitely a lot more clear that if you go down, it's a penalty. But back then, the referee had no decision to make other than give us a penalty, and thankfully I stepped up, and the keeper went. The keeper. Here we go. Here we go then. Right. Here we are. You get the ball, right? Yeah. So this is arguably, apart from the League Cup final in 1969, the biggest game in the club's history. Okay. So there you are, Paul Bodin. I might have to ask you about another penalty later on, which I know you're going to talk about. But anyway, you get the ball. What are your feelings as you step up for it? Well, as I said, I mean, you know, having taken a number of penalties that season and been quite successful, you're confident, and you have to be confident, otherwise you wouldn't step up. So it's a case of just settling yourself, setting the ball in a position where you're comfortable to strike it. Not looking at the crowd, just focusing on hitting the ball between the 3 white posts. And, you know, some you get wrong, some you get right. And you try and sort of body shape a little bit to perhaps go one way and drive it in the other side. And I sort of shaped to go to the keeper's right and just pulled it the other way to the keeper's left. And thankfully, he sort of went down to one knee quite early. But I'd already made up my mind I was going to his left. He dropped to his right. And then to see the ball hit the back of the net, run sort of between the goal and the corner flag, and turn around and everybody's jumping on you. And it's a magical moment to score any time, but certainly, you know, in that big, huge game, having been 3-0 up, come back to 3-3, and it was even in the balance. Although, as I said, we did have a couple of good chances to score, and it was the winning goal ultimately. Once the referee blew the whistle, it was a sigh of relief, but also we did play well on the day. They gave everything second half, but overall, I think,
for 90 minutes, we did deserve to win the game. And thankfully, it was the promised land then, which was going into the Premier League, which was about to start.
Yeah, extraordinary thing. I mean, of course, the third successive win for Swindon at the old Wembley. At the new Wembley, let's not talk about that. Anyway, Sean says, what a day that playoff final was. Unbelievable. Well, the town was like that evening. Seemed the whole town was out celebrating. Graham says, I remember 12-year-old me getting a rollicking off Paul many years ago for standing on and breaking a training cone.
I don't quite remember that one, but I apologise. Can I apologise?
Yeah, there we go.
Now?
Fair enough. What about that night then? Because I think it was back to Swindon, wasn't it? You all went off to, was it the De Vere? I can't remember. One of the hotels out there for a good old celebration. What do you remember of that night?
Well, I can just remember coming back on the M4 vividly. All the bridges were draped in red and white and the big Swindon flags sticking up everywhere. And then once you come off Junction 15, I mean, the roads all the way to the county ground initially were just bathed with, Swindon supporters and people who'd just come out. It was a lovely day. So the weather was great. And I think one or two of the lads got up on the roof through the Barnes coach, which is a little bit dangerous, but it was just phenomenal. I mean, that bus ride back, and Kevin Morris, we were gelling his hair up, and Eddie Buckley and the boys. Obviously, we had a few drinks, as you can imagine. And then finally, we got to the De Vere where there was a big reception. And I can't remember an awful lot because we would have had a few drinks. But I did have to get up early the next day because I was joining up with the Welsh squad, and we travelled to the Faroe Islands to play them away. So, yeah, it was a short celebration. I missed the civic reception that year, which was a shame, but I was away on international duty. So it was an early-ish night for me because I had to be on my travels. But wonderful, wonderful scenes. Obviously, you've got to celebrate them days. Football, as we know, is a roller coaster individually and for the team and the club and the supporters. But that period of time, it was successful, and I was very fortunate to come when I did in '88 and have wonderful times over the next 10 years, albeit a little trip to Sellers Park for a year to come back and have even more success.
Absolutely. This is from Craig. Yay, PB is here. Better late than never. All right, we were late starting, but never mind. A legend for the town. I've signed photograph of him putting away that penalty taken by my late father on my desk at work, which is great, isn't it? Isn't that lovely? So, Craig, thank you very much indeed for that. It's a great memory.
Well, it was such an important time in the club's history, wasn't it? Going into the Premier League, playing such wonderful football, having fantastic managers. Lou Macari, incredible to come from Man United. Ozzie Ardiles, World Cup winner. Glenn Hoddle with incredible talent to be a player manager and have the joy of seeing him and train and play with him. Unbelievable. And then we moved on to Steve McMahon after that. So fantastic players in their own rights, but also did a wonderful job for Swindon Town in that particular time, that era.
Yeah, incredible era. This is from Tony. Brilliant memories, good penalty, good days. Brings my brother Chris to mind, who lived for the town. That's Tony Scott. I wonder if is that Chris Scott? Obviously, who was involved with the sports stuff. Well, it was great man, Chris Scott, who we all knew very well. Thank you, Tony. And an amazing time then, as you say. It has to come to an end, I guess. But you kind of went out on a high, didn't you, with 95, 96 with promotion? The club went through miserable times. I mean, the Premier League, great, but not great. I mean, what are your memories of the Premier League that season?
Pretty much as you've summed up there. I mean, when we did win promotion and we were actually allowed to go up there, it was a bit of a worrying time because of what had happened previously. But thankfully, on holiday that year, it was waiting for the fixture list to come through. And then, all the players contacting each other. Have you seen the fixture list and so on? Sheffield United away, wasn't it, the first game?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to go to them wonderful grounds, full houses. And actually, our away form wasn't too bad, was it? We had some fantastic results away from home. It was just the home form. And obviously, the terrible start we had. We didn't win a game for 17 games, was it?
Yeah, it's QPR, wasn't it?
We finally beat QPR at home. But we gave it everything. We lost some, we lost Glenn, who was an instrumental player and manager. We lost Colin Calderwood. who'd obviously gone on to Tottenham, and Dave Mitchell, a bit of an unsung hero, really. Mitch,
Definitely.
a great teammate to have in your team. Electric pace, although he didn't look quick, he was deceptively quick, and caused defenders an awful lot of problems. So we lost three key players. Obviously, John stayed and became the manager, which was fine. You know, we all love John, and we do to this day. And replaced them with probably younger players at that time, people like Adrian Whitbread, Kevin Horlock, and of course, Jan Aga, who became a cult hero. You know, he didn't score for 6 months, and that possibly cost us. Although after the 6 months, when he scored at Ipswich away in the Cup, and when he started the aeroplane celebrations, we couldn't stop him. But we just couldn't get a goal out of him for 6 months. And if your striker's not scoring, you know, Keith Scott tried his best. Probably
scored on his debut, of course. Got the goal at BQPR, didn't he?
He did. But you know, Scotty was a sort of a taller, rangy kind of, but not perhaps the most technical. But he gave it everything, Scotty. But once Jan got scoring, I mean, with his technical ability as well, I mean, you just couldn't stop him. But they were great moments, great memories. I mean, you know, you'll never take them away from us and the supporters. We still talk about it when I bump into people sometimes. I was up in Old Town not long ago, and, you know, someone comes up to me and sort of says, oh, I remember you and remember the penalty, and we had great times. And we did it. And listen, the club will return, I'm sure. What, you know, maybe, hopefully they can get to the Premier, but I think they can definitely get to the Championship with, you know, if we can get some real big investment and maybe, you know, tidy up the stadium a little bit. Who knows, you know, but you've got to invest and you've got to plan longer term than perhaps we've done over the last few years.
95, 96, let's talk about that then, because that kind of was bringing, you know, after 2 successive relegations, John departs, Steve McMahon comes in. How difficult was that? I mean, I don't know. What were your thoughts on Steve McMahon? Mixed, really.
Compared to sort of the humanity of Ozzie and Glenn and Lou, where you could actually approach him, Steve was he's kind of almost aggressive natured. I don't think that would be out of order to say that. It was his first job in football. I remember him saying he was like a bull in a china shop, and that's how he sort of coached. That's how he set up the team. It was quite an aggressive team. I mean, he actually got sent off on his debut, I think, didn't he, at Southend away, or maybe not the debut, maybe a couple of games in. I think Hull City was the first game of the season that we went up. But I remember him getting sent off at Southend, and, you know, it was something that, you know, you don't like to see in football. He just leant back and elbowed the player in the face. And unfortunately, training was a little bit perhaps aggressive, overly aggressive at times. So it was a contrast, really, to what I'd experienced previously. And Steve promised me 1 or 2 things with a new contract, which never came to fruition. We signed Jason Drysdale when I was out with a bad back. And Jason took over the position fine, and he was doing really well, but he picked up a number of niggly injuries. And then that season, we won the championship. I actually played 33 games. And at Christmas, I was promised a new contract. And then I got a phone call just after the end of the season saying to go in to see the manager and the chairman, I think it was. And I you know, and this is brutally honest, I got handed basically a winner's medal because they didn't have enough to give me one on the last day. And I was handed my P45. So as much as I love Swindon Town and still do to this day, it was a very disappointing way to leave the club, having spent, you know, 8-9 years at the club. But listen, football's football, and everybody has their opinions. Everybody makes decisions, rightly or wrongly, what they consider to be the right one at that particular time. Didn't include me in it, and unfortunately, I left a little bit bittersweet, really. You know, as I said, with a championship medal in one hand and a P45 in the other. So it was a case of, you know, trying to find a new club almost from that point on. And I didn't have to move too far down the road, where obviously Jimmy Quinn was an old teammate of mine, and Mick Goodin. and I had a couple of seasons there. So again, my family could stay in Swindon, and I commuted on a daily basis. But disappointing, definitely the way I left Swindon. But in life, you have to move on. You have to take the rough with the smooth. As I mentioned earlier, life is a roller coaster. Certainly, a football career is a roller coaster, and you've just got to pick up the pieces and move on and be as positive as you possibly can be.
I remember you took over from Paul Hart, who left the club. How can we put this? It wasn't a happy regime for Paul Hart, was it? And you were named as caretaker manager for the last couple of games of the season. And I know you dearly would have wanted that job permanently. You didn't get it. Paolo Di Canio came in. You were still part of the setup. What was your relationship like with Paolo Di Canio?
Well, I came back having managed at Bath City for 3 years, and I came back to Swindon in 2001 and did some part-time coaching, and I became sort of full-time in 2006, taking on the youth team manager role. So I was at the club quite a while, worked with a few managers. Danny Wilson was probably the best one, I think, in my opinion, over the course of them years. And then, as you rightly said, Paul Hart left. He was only kind of a caretaker, but he didn't really endear himself to the supporters. The results weren't great, and ultimately relegation happened. So I took over Oldham at home, and then it was Tranmere away the last 2 games of the season. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And with Jeremy Ray, Andrew Fitton in charge, Nick Watkins was the chief exec, who I worked really closely with. I thought I had an opportunity, a genuine opportunity. I interviewed, and they asked me, would I be happy to be an assistant manager? And I said, well, who is going to be the manager then, or have you not made your mind up yet? So it was difficult to say, yes, I would be assistant, because if it was someone who I didn't have the same principles with, didn't necessarily want to work with, then obviously it would have been an uncomfortable position. So they said, okay, well, if you want to be the main manager, we'll think of that as your main role now. And I was just going away to Portugal for a few days. So I went away, and then I got a phone call sort of halfway through the week saying that there was going to be a new manager in charge, but they wanted me to be part of the setup. They didn't tell me who it was at that time. And of course, the next morning it was announced that Paolo Di Canio was going to be the manager. So it was kind of an exciting time, really. Paolo was an exceptional player, had incredible ability, and he was a joy to watch as a football purist, to watch him play. Although he had his kind of darker side, if you like, with 1 or 2 moments in football that I'm sure he would regret. But I went in, I met him, and it got off reasonably well. I was helping with perhaps looking at some of the players. He wanted to know a lot about the current players and possible new recruits. So I gave him a good rundown of all the current players, and there was a good group of players there. But they just sort of lost their way a little bit, didn't they? Things didn't quite work out for Danny as well as you would have hoped. Paul Hart couldn't sort of steady the ship. So I think there was good enough players really to avoid relegation. So I didn't think there was a lot of tinkering really to be done. A couple of good quality additions, and I think they could have bounced back. But of course, it was a radical change with Paolo. He wanted to bring as many players in as he possibly could, I think, and literally change everything from top to bottom. And he really did that. He brought a lot of his own staff in. George Wood left, who was going to be the goalkeeping coach, but they brought their own goalkeeping coach, fitness coach, assistant manager. And it was a transformation. The boys worked extremely hard. We thought we had it hard under Lou Macari, but I can assure everybody, and the training regime under Paolo, I mean, there were no days off. They were in at sort of 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and leaving sort of 7 o'clock at night through pre-season. So he was a real taskmaster and a very good coach. And he really endeared himself, didn't he, to the supporters? But, behind the scenes, there was, I think his man management was probably his weakest point, because I'd still say to this day his coaching was very good. But as a man manager, he didn't manage situations perhaps as well as he should have. But you know, he was very clever in terms of walking out onto the pitch after every game and getting the big Swindon scarf out, and the supporters stayed behind and they loved him, and I could see exactly why. But like I said, behind the scenes and knowing what I know and seeing at close quarters what was going on, it wasn't going to end in the way we'd have all liked.
Billy, of course, came through and scored a spectacular goal, if I remember right, against Crawley. An amazing goal. How do you think he treated Billy? Because he didn't really get an opportunity, did he?
No, I don't know if it's because of perhaps me or he didn't fancy Billy. I really don't know, because Paolo, you couldn't have real in-depth conversation. It was shorter conversations, and then when all the other staff arrived, it was always in Italian, so I didn't have a clue what they were saying. But no, Bill go off. I mean, to come through any system, a club system, youth development side, it is never easy. And I suppose with me there, perhaps made it a little bit more difficult. But Bill was a very good player. Will Evans, you know, there were a number of other good players at the club who came through. You know, the Thompson brothers, phenomenal players who are still playing at the moment. So, yeah, there was opportunity under Danny. I mean, Danny was the one who initially gave Bill a sort of an opportunity and gave him his first pro contract. But, yeah, I mean, Bill did quite well for a young player, but he didn't play regularly or anywhere near as regular as he would have hoped, I would have hoped. And an opportunity came for a small transfer fee to go to Torquay, where Martin Ling wanted to kind of help enhance his career and play him on a regular basis. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, he did very well at Torquay. I remember very well indeed. Of course, he plays down the road of that other place now, doesn't he? Which, what's that about, Paul? Come on, sort that out, will you? How is that possible? Right. Lots of questions coming in, comments coming in. This is from Justin. At least we were in the Premier League. Lots of clubs will never know that pleasure. Great memories, great days. Stephen says, thanks for the memories, Paul. Swindon Town legend. Graham says, what happened to Jeremy Nutty Newton? Any idea?
Jeremy Newton, that's still a good friend of mine, Jeremy. Jeremy left Swindon probably 5-6 years ago. Youth team manager, academy manager. Did a wonderful job taking the players abroad to various tournaments. He took them from sort of category 3, which what Swindon were in, playing sort of local teams. He used to take them up to Manchester United and Liverpool and Tottenham and Arsenal. So he exposed them to much higher profile opportunities. But Jeremy, for one reason or another, fell out the club under Lee Power. They didn't see eye to eye for some reason. And I'm not sure of genuinely not sure exactly what happened. But he's at Southampton, and he's an under-16 coach at Southampton, doing a great job down there, developing all the younger players and thoroughly enjoying himself. Still Bassett-based, so he's still obviously a big part of the town in terms of where he lives. But he's moved on to a Premier League club where he's being very successful.
Fabulous. Right. We've mentioned a lot. I mean, there's still loads more, and maybe we can get you on another day to talk about so much more, because I could talk to you for hours about your career, which is extraordinary, but we haven't got onto your international career yet. And one of my great memories is watching a game actually in Cardiff back in 1991. Wales won, Germany 0. Now, this is a German team, right? This is Jurgen Klinsmann, Lothar Matthäus, some pretty useful footballers. And I think I'm right in saying that Wales' only goal comes from Ian Rush. And I think it was one P. Bowden who put the ball through to Ian Rush. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely fantastic. I remember it really well. Again, I'd made my debut in 1990, just before our playoff game. Ozzie said he allowed me to go because he didn't have to allow me, because I wasn't in the initial squad. So I made my debut against Costa Rica in 1990. We beat them 1-0 at home at Ninian Park. And then a year later, as you rightly say, the German team, they were actually World Cup winners when we played them. And to beat them at the Arms Park in front of a sellout crowd, it was about the 83rd minute, I think. Their centre-half, Buchwald, had just got sent off. So there was a little bit of space at the back, and a wet evening, slippery pitch. And I picked the ball up sort of midway inside our own half. And I saw Rushy making one of them runs and just clipped the ball over the top. Thankfully, it went through, and Rushy, I don't know if he took a one touch to steady himself or just smashed it into the back of the net. And again, memories which you'll never forget. It was always a pleasure to play for Wales. They were great lads. We had some world-class players, people like Rushy, Mark Hughes, Dean Saunders, Ryan Giggs. I mean, they were phenomenal players. And Gary Speed, the late Gary Speed, a young player at that particular time. What a future he had ahead of him. And obviously, for one reason or another, things that nobody's ever really found out exactly what happened. But he cut his own life short, and absolute tragedy for his family and the football fraternity at that time and forevermore.
Yeah, very sad. It was that classic German kit, wasn't it, with the sort of zigzag formation across the front of the shirt, if I remember rightly. Extraordinary things.
It was. Yeah.
It was a great night. It was a great night, I have to say. It was a brilliant evening to be there.
It was. And again, vividly, I remember I was randomly drug tested that day. And you know what it's like when you're waiting to go after a game because you've dehydrated. It's only about 2.5 hours, and you've got to sit in the referee or a particular location, and you cannot move once the drug testers are there. You cannot move away from them. So I was drinking as much water as possible, but I couldn't go upstairs to celebrate with the rest of the players.
Oh, that's terrible. One of the greatest moments of your career, and you couldn't go upstairs.
And I'm sat waiting and trying to drink as much water to go to the toilet. But and then ultimately went up probably about 11, 12 o'clock by then, and went home to my local pub. They'd kept the doors open for us, so myself and the family, we all went in there for an hour, and then we were up early to go to Gatwick and get on a plane flight to Orlando to take the family away for a nice family holiday.
Well, wow, what a memory. Craig says, in previous interviews, Paul's hinted at the mental health challenges of being a professional footballer. Does he think that those pressures are greater or not nowadays? You mentioned Gary Speed, of course. Nobody knows what led to that very, very sad conclusion. But people think, well, footballers, what's their problem? They get paid a lot of money for doing what they want to do. They can't possibly have mental health issues, which is a nonsense, isn't it? Of course they do.
Well, absolutely. The pressure is probably from themselves, but also from the peripheral, from the surrounding things now, as we touched to a couple of times, the social media side, the Twitter, the Facebook, Sky TV, the phone-ins, the radio, there's so much more profile on a footballer now than there's ever been. And when you're in the bubble, there's probably no escape for some people. And as I mentioned earlier, to go up the pub on a Saturday and interact with the supporters, that was also kind of perhaps a release for us, where they don't get that release, when you're just on your handset tweeting people back and saying thanks for things. But when the other side comes, the darker side, where's their escape? And it's a tragedy, isn't it? There's been a number of players over the last few years, and even Swindon players who've actually, gone and cut their lives short. Personally, I've been very lucky. I've obviously been to some difficult moments in my career. The Welsh penalty when I missed, that was obviously the darkest moment in my football career, and you can never escape it. So you have to deal with it. But we're all different. Every human being is different, and how you can deal with things yourself, and if your family support perhaps is not there, or you just don't deal with things very well. But certainly from my perspective, I've been very lucky in that respect. Great family around me, and I've been able to deal with things as well. Some perhaps negativity in my early career, maybe my upbringing. Single parent, brought up on a council estate, and doing a lot of things off my own back, probably helped me mentally more than perhaps some other people who are brought up in a different environment. But it's such tragic circumstances when you hear things about such young people, not just footballers, every people in everyday life. It's absolutely tragic, and your heart goes out to them for sure.
Well, you mentioned that penalty. I didn't really want to mention it, but
I thought I would. I knew it was coming.
I watched it this afternoon, and if somebody with Welsh connections, hey, it's a penalty and you didn't score it, and but I read the quotes that it's something you live with every day of your life. But has it been eased because of Wales qualification now or not?
I don't know if it's easy because it's always there. And again, with the fact we're talking about it, but the most important thing from the Welsh qualifying is that the current group deserve it. The Welsh nation deserve it. We've been close a number of times. The time that where if I'd have scored, we'd have gone 2-1 up, and we possibly could have got there. I look at it that we still had to win the game. There was still 30 minutes to go. Something could have happened in the game. I did miss it. Obviously, it cost us an opportunity to go 2-1 up, but we weren't definitely going to win the game. We were against Romania that year, and they were brilliant. The household names, that they had, but Hadji, unbelievable player, and they went on to do really well in that World Cup. But certainly, Wales qualifying this year, I was absolutely delighted. Obviously, working at the FA up until last Thursday.
Yeah.
Fully supported Pagey and all the boys. We've had a lot of younger players going through over the last couple of years, and I think there's 9 in the squad of 28 who've come through the system in the last 3 or 4 years. So we're all very proud of the work that we've done with the Welsh FA. And Pagey, to take it on in sort of trying circumstances with Ryan Giggs' situation in the background. But Pagey's a great guy, great character, great human being, someone, who has time for everybody. And again, I can just wish the boys as much success as possible. And the Welsh nation, they'll be fully behind them. And come November, December, let's hope they can do the country proud. When you've got players like Gareth Bale and Aaron Ramsey and Joe Allen and Brendan Johnson coming through, one of the younger guys there. They've got genuine chance to win games, and they play America, the USA in the first game on the 16th, I think, in November, and let's hope they can qualify with England into the next phase. Yeah,
with Swindon connection, of course, with Johnny Williams, so that would be terrific to have another Swindon player at a World Cup, won't it? There was
absolutely
a comment here about are you going to Qatar, or you will be?
No, I'm not going to. I mean, initially, I might have been working in terms of the scouting system, but we were going to do that from this, from home. So the travel time, hotels, and everything else, it's incredibly expensive out there. So it would have been a working time for me. But as I said, and the fact that I don't work for the FA now, I'll be watching it, certainly from my home probably.
Yeah, just a few more comments and then I'll let you go. This is from Graham, follow up to the Jeremy Newton comment. Thanks for that, Paul. Lost contact with Nutty when he left. He came off social media. We went to school together and we used to take him to watch Swindon. Strangely, his first game was away at Southampton when we lost 4-2 many, many years ago. My old man somehow got us down there in his old Austin Allegro. How about that? Gerard, great stuff. Gerard says, did Paul keep any of the international opposition jerseys? Did you get Jurgen Klinsmann's or anybody like that?
I didn't know. I got Muller, the number 7, the right winger, who was.
He was all right, wasn't he? He was quite
decent. He was. Yeah. So we shook hands at the end and exchanged shirts. But I kept most of my shirts that I played against, and 1 or 2 of the main sort of games, the debut game, and a couple of Swindon shirts, obviously the key ones. But yeah, we've actually downsized now. So in the new house we haven't got all the room to put them up. So I've got them all kept in a safe place at the moment. Just trying to find an area to put them up.
Fair enough. Well, do what I do, just stick them on a wall like that. I have to take them down again though. Right. Sean says, I can't remember what programme they were on, but remember McMahon saying he had to drive around bus stops to get Swindon support or something. Kamara turned around and said, well, it wasn't like that when I was there. Gerard says, brilliant programme, Vic. Great to hear Paul. Class player and a great speaker, especially about the old Swindon stories. And do you remember a game at Sunderland, Roker Park? My memory not good. Think you scored winning penalty and they missed one. Was a mare leaving the ground that day?
I do. I remember that really well. Funny enough, I worked with Alec Chamberlain. He's been my goalkeeping coach. And we talked about Swindon Sunderland games. And Fraser Digby made a great save, didn't he? Late in the game, the 80-odd minute. But I scored a goal in open play, I think. I just got played in behind the defence and struck it across the goalkeeper. Tony Norman, who was also a Welshman, second fiddle to Neville Southall back in the day. But yeah, what a place to go. The Roker Raw on a cold, brisk day. Jeez. But fantastic memories and great for the gentleman there to remind me of that. What a wonderful day.
Yeah, this is from Stirlingshire Reds. This is regarding our penalty at Wembley. Relive it. Didn't even watch the first time. We were behind the goal. I had my back turned. Couldn't look. I've had to do the same each time since when we've had a critical penalty. Oh, Port Vale, don't mention it. Of course, you were at Port Vale for a while, weren't you? Can still hear the roar that went up around me when it went in. So there we are. There's another memory. Yeah, because you were with Rob Page at Port Vale, weren't you?
I was, yeah. So I knew Rob through the Welsh intermediate teams. He was 21s and I went in as 19s manager. But Rob, he got the Port Vale job and give me a call and asked me would I be interested in going up there. So I went and had a chat with him. And we had an interesting chairman there, Norman Smedhurst. Smurthwaite. He liked to sort of put things on Twitter about the team and tell us what we did wrong and did right. Very, very often it was wrong and not right, apparently. But actually a nice bloke. After I met him after I'd left the club, and a real nice, genuine man. But when he was your chairman, he wasn't very helpful, to be fair.
What are you up to now, then? You've left the Welsh FA. I think it was from mutual consent. That's what I read anyway, so I don't know. But what are you up to? What are you up to next?
Well, to be honest, I spoke to Sean Hodges earlier, and I might be doing a bit of commentary for the Swindon Town games in the coming weeks. I'll have a little bit of time off. I think someone mentioned earlier I've been in the game for 40 years, is it?
40 years, yeah.
So I might need a little break. I've had a small one with the wife after we had some June games at the end of our qualification games. So maybe another well-earned break with the wife. And then I'll come back and see. I mean, whether I want to be travelling up and down motorways, I'm not so sure. But, I want to stay and do something. And if I can help in any way, whether it was at Swindon Town or, I'm open to sort of options, but maybe not in a full-time role. It'll be more of a part-time role and maybe a bit of scouting, a bit of monitoring players and so on. But still love the game. Still want to go and watch games. I'll probably go down the road, say it quietly, to watch Bill this season. And hopefully he can have a good season himself.
We wish him well, clearly, but maybe not. Yeah. Is that all right? Can I say that? Is that okay?
I'm happy to say that, Vic. That's very nice of you.
Yeah, good. You're welcome on our Monday night panel anywhere, anytime you want. I mean, we'd love to have you on. We'd do one regularly after a game. It'd be lovely to have you on occasionally, if that would be okay with you.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be fine, Vic. Yeah, if we can get some.
Especially if you've commentated on the game on the Saturday, we'll get you on the Monday night.
Yeah, that'll be fine. Sean's going to call me in the next few days, and we'll see if we can put some dates in, so we can slot the Monday night in on the back of them games. That'll be fine.
How brilliant is that? That's fantastic.
I've got your contact details now, Paul. You're not going to get away.
Yeah, it was very difficult trying to get in touch with you at the start.
I know.
I did try, as you can probably.
Yeah.
No, totally.
Well, I think you'll tell from the reaction that we've had. People are very glad that you did, and
yes.
So thank you very much.
Part 2 anyway. So
yeah, it's been thoroughly enjoyable, and it's nice to rekindle the old memories for myself and for everybody else. So look forward to stage 2.
That'd be great. Thank you, and it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to see you, Vic. Thanks.
Brilliant. Don't go anywhere, Paul. Don't switch off or anything just at the minute, okay? So I'm going to come off live and then we'll come back. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. We will be back next Monday, as we said. We have got a panel next Monday. And then we will see from there on what we can plan. Okay, so take care and see you on Monday.